Hey, how's it going? It's Sam Frost here, back with some more digital marketing advice. In today's video, I want to talk about the new Google algorithm update that's been announced for March 2024 that's causing a lot of buzz in the SEO world. So Google has announced, as they sometimes do, a new algorithm update. And this algorithm update, basically the core of it is Google is effectively declaring war or continuing with their previous declaration of war on spam content in Google search results, what they perceive as spam content and low quality, sort of unhelpful content. Now, there have been a bunch of Google updates over the last year or so that have tried to kind of mitigate the impacts of things like AI content on search. So you saw things late last year, for example, such as the helpful content update that really negatively impacted on a lot of niche info sites, blogs, those kind of things, including some that I run, because Google basically is being presented with this overwhelming crush of AI-generated content that's often targeted to very specific keywords. People will plug into Google search to find an answer, and instead Google's kind of come along and relied more on things like user-generated content, Reddit, forums, YouTube videos, or very powerful authoritative domains. You've probably noticed things like Forbes.com ranking really well in Google. Well, long story short, Google is kind of continuing with that with this latest update, and the update is kind of based around three key pillars. And in this video, what I want to do is really talk more about the algorithm update from the perspective of what it means for a real-world business owner. There's enough discussion and conjecture around these Google updates for niche site operators, bloggers, those kind of things. But most of the people watching my videos, most of my customers, well, all of them in fact, operate real world businesses in the sense that they sell a service or they sell products or whatever the case may be. They're not trying to monetize a website via display advertising or affiliate links. That kind of business model, I think fundamentally that's what Google is almost trying to destroy to a certain extent. Some of it justified, a great deal of it not. There seems to be this general attitude from Google that you have to be willing to create content and give it to Google to display in search and probably feed into AI information display, basically with no expectation of being able to generate revenue or profit off it anymore. And so it's quite a sort of change to the fundamental relationship, whereas in the past it was like, hey, I want to blog about dog training or cars, whatever you want your blog to be about, and you would create content. Google would give you traffic in exchange for basically giving Google useful content to show in its search rankings, and you could make money off that content. Now Google's almost saying, hey, you need to be cool with the idea that we will take your content and potentially feed our AI algorithms with it and return featured snippets and all those kind of things, but potentially give you no traffic back whatsoever. That's a topic for a different time, but this algorithm update that's been announced for March 2023, it's really focused around three key areas in terms of what Google basically have overtly said they're going to try and penalize and minimize. So the first one is scaled content generation. And so basically Google's coming along and saying, hey, we want to really take seriously scaled content generation, which most people seem to be taking to mean if you're using AI to generate large volumes of content. So you can go along and get auto-blocking tool, plugs into ChatGPT, uses the OpenAI token system, for example, and you could put in, 1,000 keywords and have 1,000 WordPress blog posts published within 20 minutes. And that kind of content generation Google is trying to crack down on, or so they claim. So there's that aspect to it. There are also things that are becoming more popular, like programmatic SEO, because it's easier to do now, where you use, say, a database. So if you thought about something like how many calories are in a Red Bull can, or how many calories are in a Monster Energy can, or how many calories are in a can of Coke, you could have a database of a product and then the number of calories in the can or the container, and you just generate pages off the back of that. So how many calories are in X product, Y is the answer, and you just basically programmatically create that content. That could be caught up as well. I actually would be a bit disappointed to see Google going after programmatic content, because I think it's generally more helpful than AI content, which is often very waffly and wordy. Programmatic content, can sometimes be a really great way to just get a simple answer to a question. There's a website I stumbled across recently looking for information about spark plugs for a car, and it's just a very simple programmatic thing from an execution perspective. There's obviously some big database of what the factory spark plug model is, and then equivalent part numbers from other manufacturers, kind of OEM or third-party suppliers. And I'd hate to see Google penalize a site like that. According to Ahrefs, it's getting a lot of traffic, and it deserves it because it's actually a really simple no nonsense, no fluff way of getting an answer. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there, but that's one pillar of what Google's targeting. The next pillar they're targeting with this update is expired domain spam. So expired domain spam or exploitation is where you go and you find website domains that used to be something else that have a whole lot of backlinks pointing to them, and you register that domain. And it seems from the update kind of wording that Google's primarily focusing on where people are buying domains for old websites and then just bringing those old sites back to life, even though the new domain owner doesn't have the copyright on that old content. They're bringing it back to life and then doing that just to get rankings, or potentially turning an expired domain that was on one topic into something very, very different. So, you find an expired domain name that used to be about squirrel hunting and you turn it into something about car maintenance because that domain name just has a whole load of backlinks and it's got power. So that's something else Google is looking at doing. And then the final piece Google is looking to crack down on is what we call parasite SEO, which has become more and more of a thing as Google has prioritized big authoritative domains and demoted smaller websites, particularly in the wake of that helpful content update. Parasite SEO is not a new concept. It's how I got my start in digital marketing years and years ago. I would go and write articles and put them on websites like eZine Articles and Hub Pages and Squidoo, if you've ever heard of those. They were like third-party websites that ranked really well in Google. And what you could do is register an account, publish your content. That platform would get exposure, they would get more traffic, they could monetize that with display ads, and then I, in exchange, would be able to push people off from my rankings using this third-party site off to affiliate offers. Parasite SEO now has moved more and more in the direction of basically paying to get content put on websites. So there are sites like, I think it's Times of India is one, for example, where you can basically just go along and this is like a news website that ranks well in Google that has a legitimate authoritative component to it, but then allows anybody to come along and say, hey, here's money, publish this article on, best cheap payday loans or whatever the case may be. And it kind of lowers the tone of that site, but it's a great revenue stream for that site. And it allows basically people who want to rank in Google to bypass having to rank their own site because you're piggybacking, parasiting off someone else's domain authority. So that's something else that Google is looking at kind of cracking down on with this update. All of these three pillars, the scaled content generation, the expired domain aspect, and the parasite SEO, ultimately, I think they're more targeted at that niche site building, affiliate marketing, display advertising, monetization side of things. If you operate a real world business, e-commerce, service business, whatever the case may be, you're unlikely to encounter probably too many issues with this type of update. If you're very, very heavily dependent on using, say, long tail keyword targeted blogs to get people to your website to turn them into leads and turn them into customers, you might want to watch how your rankings track, how your organic traffic tracks. But realistically, I'd say the average business owner doesn't have a huge amount to worry about here. These types of updates don't seem to have anywhere near as much impact on local SEO rankings for best cafe in Christchurch or best heat pump cleaning in Auckland or whatever the case may be. They don't seem to have so much impact on e-commerce or product-based rankings in sort of specific areas or territories. It tends to be this more informational driven stuff. So if you're not running that model and you're running a more legitimate business, I think you don't need to panic. This update is causing a lot of panic, I think, amongst niche site operators, affiliate marketers, and so on. Of course, wherever there's panic, there's also opportunity, and people will probably find all sorts of ways to work around it, being one step ahead of Google. But if you do operate a legitimate site, which is really an extension of a legitimate business, I wouldn't be too worried. What you should probably do is keep an eye on things. One thing to possibly be aware of, though, is if you've been using AI to just create tons and tons of content for your business, that might be something that Google could sort of frown on. But hopefully this actually does improve the kind of quality of Google's results, because I think it's pretty clear that Google's kind of created a rod for their own back. The things like the helpful content update late last year, okay, that might have resulted in kind of made for monetization via display ad websites falling out of favor in Google rankings, but instead you've wound up with things like old Reddit threads or Quora discussions with very inaccurate information coming up number one, or just this overwhelming crush of big websites like Forbes, for example, ranking number one when there's no sort of subject matter authority or topical authority. It's just that they have a strong domain and they can rank whatever they want. So hopefully this actually improves search. So interested to hear your take on this, see what your kind of feedback is. If you're worried about how this might affect your real world business and your business website, I wouldn't be too panicked yet. this kind of update, there's almost an element of you would know if you're engaged in these kind of behaviors that Google is saying you shouldn't be doing. And if you're just running a website to capture leads in your local area, you probably don't have too much to worry about. But do leave a comment if you've got any questions or concerns. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.